This video is going to go over what we wish every customer knew about ordering O-ring kits for their fuel injectors. Today it's going to specifically reference top feed fuel injectors, and we'll get into other injectors in another video. So the first thing that we want to get into everybody's head is that every injector is very similar and it's not as complicated as you might think it is. It might look like a daunting task because of the number of components that are actually available on our website. But for the most part, most injectors utilize all the same components or a variation of it. It's also possible to use different components than what actually came on your injector to accomplish the same thing that the injector's purpose is. One of the things that everyone should realize is that you might not even need an O-ring kit. That might not be your issue. Your issue might be that your injectors are not working correctly and you hear that there's a filter that is inside of your injectors. And if you just replace that, everything will be fine. That is not necessarily the case. So a lot of people order O-ring kits and then still end up sending their injectors in for service later on. Injector O-ring kits and replacement components are all included in the price of service if you were to send your injectors in. So you might want to just skip the step of even purchasing the O-ring kit to rebuild at home yourself and just send them in for service. There is a cost for shipping. There's, the components themselves. By the time you order a kit, you've already paid for a portion of the injector service if you had just sent them in to us. So if you already know that all you need is an O-ring kit, a filter, a pintle cap, whatever the component is that you need, finding out which one of those components it is that you need is not as difficult as it seems. My name is Keith and I've been with Injector-Rehab for almost 30 years now. About 25 years ago or so, we started offering individual components to the general public. Back then, there was only a handful of companies that were doing injector service, and selling the components individually to the public was not something that was the norm. No one really did that. We made a decision to sell them individually versus as entire kits, because not everybody needs to purchase, say, every component for all 8 injectors in a V8. You might just needed new O-rings. You might just needed pintle caps broken on one of them. The reason that we did that was a conscious decision, but it also led to people wanting to have a kit for ease. The kits that we have on the website also cover many other applications. So it might read that it's just say an RX-7 fuel injector service kit. However, it covers a multitude of other applications. We're going to go into a video showing you the difference between different injectors. One of the other things we want customers to know is that the color of something doesn't necessarily mean that that's the right or wrong component for your particular injector. Your injector might have a blue top, but the picture that's on our website for something that looks just like your injector might have a yellow top. That doesn't mean that the components themselves are different. You just have to take a look at it. This is not very complicated. We do also have application guides, and these application guides can be referenced at the top of the website where it says application guide. You can download that and look through it. Or in each component, one of the additional images that's on the website shows you the other components that this would go with and what injectors that component actually fits. If your pintle cap is a tannish brown, but the cap on the website is black, that doesn't mean it's the wrong pintle cap. One of the more common things that we hear all the time are people questioning, can these components fit this? Or do you have components for my application? And they think that their application is something special. Well, unfortunately, I'm here to tell you, you're not special in this case. Injectors are pretty dumb devices, and they have a simple task that they need to do, is to deliver fuel at a specified flow rate, and that's pretty much it. And they need to seal off the fuel delivery, and they also need to seal off the air intake side. So each injector will have an upper O-ring and a lower O-ring, or a lower grommet, or something that's going to seal that side of it. For instance, here, as saying you're not special, this injector here is from a Lamborghini. This one here is from a base model Ford Taurus. They're made by the same company, Bosch. They have the same O-rings, the same pintle caps, the same filters inside of them. They're the same. It's not special just because it's a Lamborghini. So you have to kind of get that out of your head, that what you have is something special. It's not. It's a fuel injector. It's a pretty dumb device that uses a lot of the same components. You know, there's a handful of companies that make fuel injectors, and they're also somewhat of an industry standard, I guess you can call it. You know, most American injectors come with a 14 millimeter O-ring, while import injectors typically come with an 11 millimeter O-ring. Beyond that, there's not much difference to it. Yes, there's slight variations, but you can use a universal 14 millimeter O-ring to solve the problem of sealing the fuel on, you know, on your injector there. There's not much more to it than that. The pintle caps themselves have a purpose of protecting the pintle itself from being broken if it were dropped or something hitting it while it was out of the out of the application. And they also hold on the lower O-ring. Beyond that, there's not much of a purpose to do anything else beyond that. It's a pretty simple purpose and a pretty simple component. So don't overthink it. Don't think that you need to get, oh my goodness, I have a Mazda Miata, and this kit here says it's for whatever the other application is. If your injector looks just like that, it's a different color maybe, different electrical connector, it doesn't matter. It's the same components. So let's take a look at some of the components that would go with these different fuel injectors. We're going to kind of go through, again, top feed port injection is what we're talking about here. And over time, injectors have changed. However, the O-rings on a lot of them have not changed. They're still serving the same purpose. They're still operating under that same industry standard. An injector might be taller, shorter. It doesn't really matter. Okay, so we're going to kind of start in the beginning. These here are some of the original fuel injectors for port injection, where you use a hose to come on the end of these. Are called hose feed injectors. And there's very little difference in components that there could possibly be. There was two different styles of a body grommet that would go around the body where they held the injectors in. And the pintle caps themselves were either a flat pintle cap or one that had a little nipple on it. Pretty obvious. You know, if your injectors had, this one here has a flat one. Doesn't have the little nipple on the end there. But all the filters are exactly the same. That goes in the top. The rubber grommets on the lower side here, same. The big difference is those two there. So when we order a kit on our website, it's pretty much going to fit your injectors. So moving on to the next iteration of Bosch injectors here is when we went away from the hose end and we started sealing with O-rings at the top and creating a common rail. So these here are what are known as EV1 injectors. And again, they all take pretty much the same components. All the filters are exactly the same. The pintle caps can be different on each of them, but again, they just serve a purpose of protecting the pintle and holding that O-ring on. And these also have a little spacer in between there. There are two different sizes of spacers. It's not that complicated. I think there's maybe two injectors that use the one oddball, but for the most part, every one of them use the exact same spacer that's on there. Some of these injectors, you'll see they might not be made by Bosch, but by another manufacturer and have a very similar look to them. Some of them actually take that same pintle cap that was on the hose end injectors and they would just slide right up on top. This is what it looks like underneath of taking all these components off of there. So this particular cap could actually fit onto that EV1 injector. You'll find that the difference between them could be by the manufacturer of the vehicle specifying something different. Like this here, for instance, it's finned. This is a BMW pintle cap. Well, it can fit on any one of these injectors. And on this injector here, you can fit any of the other pintle caps. It was just kind of a manufacturer request that looks a little different, makes theirs unique. I don't exactly know why they did that, but I'm sure, they wanted to stand out because they're BMW and they think there's something special, I guess. So that's why they did that. Around this same era, you would also find what's known as like a Rochester injector. These injectors here would take the same O-rings that is on one of the Bosch injectors, and it would seal exactly the same way. See, the O-rings go on there. You got, the lower side also takes the same O-ring. That's it. And there's a filter in the top. This injector here doesn't have a pintle cap. These were like a ball and disc style injector. So you need 2 O-rings, same one, top and bottom. It's that simple. Again, universal filter that goes in there, and that's it. So this style injector is known as the 150 series. And if you can see in this image here, the part number will be 0280150. So that 150 starts all the way back at the hose end injectors, and then it moves into what we'll go over next, which would be the 155 series. After the 150 series became obsolete, everything moved over to the 155 series here. Again, it's the same beginning, 0280155 is the middle number there. And we also have 156, 157. They also all kind of look the same. These injectors here, again, take the same filter on the top. They also take the same O-rings on either side. You know, these here could come with 3 different types of what are called pintle caps, even though these don't have an actual pintle. They do still hold on that lower O-ring, just like in the previous version. The difference also on these here is they have an upper retainer. This can come off, this can crack. If it is not broken on yours, I would not suggest replacing it. It's not needed. We do have this component available, but we don't really include it in our kits because it's not something that you have to replace. So if yours is broken, you can replace it. As time moved on, and these injectors here, which were like a 60 millimeter O-ring to O-ring injector, room underneath the manifolds and in the engine bays became tighter, and injectors started becoming smaller. So this injector here is still one of those 155 series injectors, still uses all the same components. It's just physically smaller. There's not really any difference between, you know, these two other than the height difference here. And as we move on into the 158 series, you'll see an even shorter injector. You know, these injectors here were made by Siemens. And again, they can seal with the same exact universal O-rings. They do have specific O-rings to these, but they're just such a slight difference that it really doesn't matter. Kind of to backtrack here, Siemens also used to have this style, which, as you can see, kind of looks similar to the EV1 Bosch injectors, where it had a metal body and a plastic top, and these became all plastic here. These do use a different lower O-ring, but you can find that in the application guide. And this here, you can see this 156 series looks just like the 155. And this here is 157 series. And again, it's the same basic injector. There's not much difference between it. Again, there are goofy one-off injectors that do exist, which, you know, have different lower O-rings, but even for the most part, these here, the upper O-ring is the same as any other EV1 injector or the plastic 155 series. Filters are the same. On these here, the upper retainer is the same, but we do have the, you know, the application guide can show you which O-ring this takes here. So finally, these are the 158 series, which are also commonly known as the EV14. And this, you can see, these are, there you go. So this is the 158 series. So these are all the newest version. And again, these all take the same components. And I use these specifically here to point something out for you. But the, you know, upper and lower O-ring is different than the EV1. However, the lowers are the same across all of them, no matter if it has a long nozzle or it doesn't. All these have what is a big misconception about being a replaceable pintle cap. This one here, you can see it's removed. It's broken. The way that this cap actually goes on is it's molded into the injector itself. It's not a replaceable component. So if your injector is missing that, we don't sell it because it can't be replaced. So I probably shouldn't tell you this here, but people do still use this injector if it's broken rather than replacing it. Depending on the application, you know, it could be quite expensive, and, you know, replacements could be hard to find. The injector itself, you can kind of see there's a little lip on this here, and people claim that that's enough to hold that O-ring in place. I do not recommend that. This is not me recommending run that with that. I would say replace the injector. but people do that, just as a FYI. But that component cannot be replaced. It's not a pintle cap. It's a lower, O-ring retainer, and it's molded into the injector when it's made, so you cannot replace it. It's not something to be replaced. The other thing to note is that none of these were designed to run without a filter, so they do not have a filter. So if you pull these out and say, "Oh, I'm missing the filters. I can't find the right filter for it," it doesn't need a filter. It doesn't have a filter. We do make a filter that can fit into this, but it's not something we list on our website. It's something more for an internal projects where we are selling these injectors to fit into applications in the early 80s and late 70s into some old Volkswagens and Porsches and things like that can have some really dirty systems. So we put filters inside of those, but they're designed to run without a filter. So a lot of times here, what we do on changing the height of an injector like this here, where we make top hats and things like this to change the overall height of an injector and make it taller so that the O-ring is taller there. The filter goes inside the top of the adapter, not inside the injector itself. So these injectors here are early Nip and Denso. And you can see there's kind of a little bit different style to these, but for the most part, they are all the same. They all take the same O-ring, the same filter inside. The upper grommet here, it's like a cushion that goes on top of it, which gets hard and brittle. New ones are nice and soft. The pintle caps on these here can be one of two different caps, and we explain that on the website. And the grommet is the same on all of these here. Pretty much no matter what application it is. Same lower grommet, same upper grommet, same O-ring, same filters. Some injectors in the newer ones were designed to run without this upper grommet, but for the most part, they're the same. And on these other Denzos, like even when you get into the different styles like the Toyotas use, again, the same upper and lower O-ring on each of these. So if the upper O-ring is the same on the others, it's the same on these. And then when they went to their plastic body style here, again, used all the same components. There's no difference between them, even though they look completely different. So another thing that might be worth mentioning during this portion of the video is the filter themselves. There are different size filters, and as you can see here, there's ever slightly difference in length. There are many different lengths, and when you pull an injector out, you might not know what length it has, or it looks clearly longer than the universal filter. But I'm here to tell you that after flowing thousands and thousands of injectors, there is no difference whatsoever if you use the longer filter, no filter, a shorter filter. There are people that swear by that. I can tell you that is not the case. The filter does not restrict flow or add more flow. So here in the case of the newer Denso injectors, again, they all use the same lower grommet if they're using a grommet. And in this case here, they use an O-ring, and they're the same O-ring on either of those, despite the color. Upper O-ring is a different O-ring than the other 14 millimeter O-rings, but it is still the same across those Denso injectors. The pintle caps are actually different, and they can get a little bit confusing, but there are images on the website to help explain what the injector looks like that these fit to. But again, same filter in every one of those. This injector here has that same upper grommet as the older metal style ones. The O-rings are the same on the 11 millimeters. This upper O-ring retainer is the same as all of the old ones, whether it was from a Bosch injector or from these Denso injectors for Toyotas. It's all the same. So these here are Delphi injectors that are found into GMs. The O-ring, upper O-ring is the same on all of these. It doesn't matter if it's the short version or the long version, but there are two different versions out there. The caps are the same. The lower O-rings are the same. The one thing I would recommend on these, if your lower cap is not broken, do not replace it, because this is a case where the original is better than the replacement. So I would stick with those if they're not broken. The other thing to note on these is there is a filter that most people miss. It is way down in there. I don't know if you can see it, but there is a filter that you need to pull out of there and replace that. It's a little bit different than other, top feed injectors being very flush at the top of the of the injector, like you can kind of see here. You can see that filter. This one is recessed way down inside. Just a note, I hate these injectors. So one of the last ones we'll go over is a can injector. These are found in a lot of Hondas. There's very little difference between any of these things. The plug is usually different, the flow rate, and it's really hard to tell what the injectors actually are without flowing them. They all have the same number stamped on them, and people try to refer to them as that, but that number means nothing. But for the most part, these do have one of those upper grommets, but it's a different height than any of the other injectors, and also has a lower grommet, which is specific to the Hondas, and they are a different height. So you can kind of see the difference here between the heights of those. So you kind of, I mean, this is all spelled out on the website when you go to buy the kits, and it will tell you, which grommet to look for, but you can kind of see the difference here. The height of that lower grommet is one of the only differences. Everything else is all the same components. This injector here, again, for sure, is one that you do not want to replace that pintle cap unless it is broken. Leave it in place. If it is cracked, you'll find that it is a real pain in the you-know-what to get out, because it does go up inside of the injector itself. So in order to replace another cap, you have to get every bit of it out of there, and they are a real pain to replace. There are newer Hondas, like plastic body ones. I just pulled one out as an example here. There's many different types, but again, these are all spelled out in the application guide, showing you a clear, indication of what cap they are, what O-rings. Filters are all the same in all these key injectors, but the individual components are all spelled out in the application guide. So I hope this video clears up a lot of confusion for people, gives them a little bit more confidence around placing an order for their components, and also maybe it helps someone realize that just changing the components isn't going to actually solve their problem, that their problem should be addressed by sending their injectors in for service. We refer to a lot of times as components as being like dirty underwear. Just changing your dirty underwear doesn't actually fix the problem that caused the dirty underwear in the first place. So you might want to actually clean everything up. All right, everybody, thanks for watching. I'm Keith from Injector-Rehab, and I'll see you on the next video.